Hello, thank you for joining us today. I'm Susie Gray and I'm part of the Filmhouse team working on engagement around the proposals for the new Filmhouse. We'd obviously hoped to be meeting in person there in the current building to show you our plans and to answer your questions in person, but we can't do that in the current circumstances. So thank you for coming on this journey with us and joining this online forum instead. I hope you've had the chance to look at all the information that's available on the website and watch videos that have been emailed and are online. We've scheduled the session to last an hour, and there are another 3 sessions, 1 tonight and 2 tomorrow, if you think anybody else might like to tune in and join us. We're streaming live onto YouTube now and also recording the session to make available online later. So if you need to stop and help with some homeschooling or dash and make a cuppa, don't worry, you'll be able to look at the whole recording of this session later on the internet. We have Louisa McDade with us today, live captioning the session, which is terrific. So a big thank you to her for doing that. You can access the captioning through the captioning function button at the bottom of your screen. Or if you can't see it there, check in your Zoom settings and you should be able to turn that on. We're going to ask 1 or 2 questions as we go, just to give us a sense of who has joined us today and how you feel about the proposals to date. So let's have a look at one of those polls now. Let's have a go at one of those now. So you'll see a poll appear on your screen and it's very easy. Just click on the most appropriate answer. So the first poll: how often do you attend Filmhouse? Is it more than once a month, every 6 months, once a year, every 2 years, or have you not seen a film at the Filmhouse? Okay, we'll have a look at those results and let you know. Paul, are you perhaps able to share that with us? I'm getting a couple of notes that we can't see that, so we'll come back and do that shortly. Oh, here we go. All right, so if you can take a moment and have a look through those options and let us know how often. That's great. The answers are pouring in. So you're really, really regular attenders. Lots of you have come more than once a month, and many of you once a month. Those are really the predominant answers. Yeah. Okay, I'll end that one there. So thank you for that. We've got 3 panelists here, each to lay out their thinking on the proposed new building. So I'll introduce them. There's Ken Hay, Chief Executive of the Centre for the Moving Image, which incorporates Filmhouse as well as Edinburgh International Film Festival and Belmont, Aberdeen. Richard Murphy, the award-winning architect whose plans for the new building you have hopefully had a chance to look at on the Filmhouse website. And Fraser Littlejohn, sorry, gremlins on my screen. Fraser Littlejohn, who's a planning partner at Montague Evans, who are the property consultants on this capital project. So their presentations will take around 5 to 10 minutes in total. And then we've had some questions in advance, and we will be hoping for some questions from you watching through the live Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. So Ken, I think over to you to share something of the vision for this project.
Thank you very much. As you'll see, I am now sharing an image of the proposal. I suppose the first thing is just to address the obvious question is, why do we need to move? There's such a huge amount of affection for Filmhouse. I've been attending Filmhouse myself since the mid-1980s. And obviously I've had the huge privilege and honour of running the organisation since 2011. In short, we're operating in a building that is completely inadequate for what it is we're trying to achieve. And whether that's for our regular customers, and it's great to see so many of you joining us today. Anyone who knows Filmhouse knows that the conditions are really cramped. The toilets, there aren't enough of them. They're cramped. The seats are cramped. The aisles are cramped. Navigating your way through the building, I've worked out there's 4 different ground floors, which means there's steps in all the wrong places, platform lifts in the wrong places, trying to enable people to get through the building. You might not know it's a 190-year-old Georgian church building originally, but there's actually 4 buildings making up the whole of what you would know as Filmhouse. And so what you have is quite a higgledy-piggledy arrangement, which in some situations you're going is utterly fascinating. It's great in terms of aspects of the experience. It's really poor in terms of trying to operate it and for allowing us to be as accessible to as many people as possible. The bursting at the seams part, and some people go, but you're never full when I come. It depends when you come, and it depends what we've got going on at the time. But just to give it a scale of what we do each year, we attract over 200,000 people into the building to see films each year. Another 10,000 school kids are being engaged in different ways in terms of learning opportunities as well as seeing films. And we have over 300,000 people coming into the cafe bar each year. We would love to do more. We host 20 smaller film festivals each year, as well as a whole range of other special events, seminars, workshops, masterclasses, training and learning opportunities. And we just can't fit everything into that one space. So what we've come up with is a proposal that not just allows us to fit what we currently do in a more comfortable way, but actually allows us to evolve and develop as an organization as ourselves, but also as a host organization for so much more. The other final bit before I move on to this building is we've had 40 years or so, we've been in Filmhouse since the late 70s, of compromises. Each time we try and fix one thing, it has this whole knock-on impact elsewhere. And what we're trying to do is address that as we design something that is genuinely fit for purpose. And underpinning all of that is our core vision, which is to transform people's lives through film. And whether that's watching films, making films, or learning about and understanding films, it's how we can use that to inspire people and change people's lives. So the vision and the proposal, and I suppose it's just emphasizing, and Richard and Fraser will both probably emphasize this again, this is a work in progress. We are genuinely consulting on this is where we've got to in the process, but need your input. And what we're looking at doing is how we can create a space that works for everyone. So we've set out 4 design principles. First of all, that the building must provide the quantity and quality of spaces that we need as both Filmhouse and the Edinburgh International Film Festival, but also that all our partners need as well, and everyone else who's coming into the building. And whether that's a member of the public coming in to watch a film or an industry practitioner coming along to a particular event, making sure that every aspect works for them. But crucially, that it allows us to operate sustainably. With the constraints we have in the existing building, it's getting harder and harder for us to actually operate sustainably. This and what we're proposing will allow us to operate sustainably for the foreseeable future. Secondly, it's around access and inclusion. The existing building, we attract a broad range of folk in, but we're really constrained in how we can make all the different spaces in the building accessible, both to members of the public, but also to members of staff. And one of the underlying principles of what we're setting out here is that every last aspect of the building will be fully accessible, whether you're a member of the public or a member of staff. And a really simple example of that is with projection boxes. We've looked at relatively new cinema constructions. Projection boxes always seem to be up a flight of stairs. Within this building, the projection boxes will cater for everyone, whatever your mobility issues are. Thirdly, we've got fundamental commitment to addressing the climate emergency. Again, operating a very dispersed building designed and built 190 years ago, making sure it's energy efficient is really, really hard work. And what we're proposing here is it will be as sustainable, environmentally sustainable as it can be in terms of operations. And that will include photovoltaic cells, it will include air-sourced heat pump and circulation, but will also include electricity that's sourced from verifiably renewable energy sources. So we won't have any gas supplies, any fossil fuel supplies coming into the building. And then the last one is we're fully aware we're taking up precious public space in Edinburgh's city centre. Festival Square, however, has never really worked. I remember it when it was railway sidings, and it's been constructed over the last 35, 40 years in quite an unplanned way. However, it's the centerpiece of not just 2 office blocks and a hotel, it's the centerpiece of Edinburgh's cultural quarter, which includes the Lyceum, the Traverse, and the Usher Hall. And what we're proposing is that Filmhouse genuinely becomes part of that cultural quarter, and that we use that to animate the space of Festival Square year round, creating spaces that, yes, can be for people to sit out and eat and drink, come along and just sit out and enjoy the sunshine or the views, but also to create a space that is accessible for artists and performers to ply their trade as well. So this is where we've got to, and we really want to hear what you have to say about it. And I'll now pass you back to Susie.
That's great. Thank you, Ken. Just before I hand over to Richard, I wonder if we're slick enough to try one other quick poll. So we want to ask you this time, do you know that Filmhouse is a charity? So Paul, rustle up a poll. Okay, no poll. There we go. That's brilliant. Okay, so the results are in, and 85% of you are already aware that Filmhouse is run by a charity. Great. So we're going to hand over to Richard now, and he can take us through the designs for the proposed building. Richard, you're muted still.
Sorry about that. Good afternoon. My colleague is going to put a drawing up, I think, which you can all see with a bit of luck in a minute. Paul? Thank you very much. I'm going to take you on a tour of the building, but before I do that, I'd say what our sort of ambition is with it, really, and to put it into the context of Edinburgh. I mean, Edinburgh is a wonderful city. It has some very distinctive cultural buildings which stand out, if you like, from the generality of buildings. We all think of the National Gallery, the Royal Scottish Academy, the Royal Scottish Museum, the Portrait Gallery, etc. The Usher Hall, of course, across the road. These are all recognizable temples to their own art form, whether it's music or painting or sculpture, what have you. Film, which is the quintessential 20th century culture, doesn't have its equivalent building. We're behind the facade of 18th century church. So we're trying to achieve all the practical things that Ken mentioned a minute ago, but we're also trying to have a sort of quantum leap, I think, into how people in Edinburgh and beyond think of film, and they think of the Filmhouse as the natural center for making and viewing and discussing film. So we have a very high ambition to be very, very prominent, if you like. And that leads me to the other question of why are we putting it in Festival Square? We want to have a civic building which has its own space around it, just as the Usher Hall does, just as, shall we say, the City Chambers does with its courtyard in front, just as the Royal Scottish Museum does in Chambers Street, National Gallery, etc., etc. So that is our ambition, which is a very high ambition, and to make it obviously in a building of our own time. So I'll start. What I'm going to show you in this drawing is a very quick tour from bottom to top. so that you can get your bearings if you haven't already looked at various drawings that are available. So at the very bottom is a level of kitchens and plant, which is not terribly exciting. The next floor up is the concourse where people wait and go into the cinemas. You'll see all this in a minute in the movie. The next floor up is the main bar and restaurant, which is a floor below the ground level, but very much connected to it using roof lights, which you'll see in a moment. Obviously, the ground level is where you come in. There's a cafe and a box office, and above that is a mezzanine cafe. And then we have a large space above all that, which we are calling the Festival Centre, which is not just about the film festival, but all the different other festivals that the Filmhouse stage. And it's supposed to be a busy and special space, which can be divided into two and used independently of the cinemas downstairs. And then the next two floors are offices, one for the Filmhouse and Film Festival, and the other for production companies, which Ken mentioned ago. And then the penultimate floor is a rather spectacular rooftop restaurant. And then the very top is an open bar with a canvas roof, and where you can also watch cinema on a summer's evening. So that's a very quick scamper up the building. Now, if we can go to the movie, Paul, I'll talk you through this. We're coming down here from past the castle and looking at the buildings in Cambridge Street. So you can see how Cambridge Street frames the festival square, but the building itself is set slightly asymmetrically in the square so that the entrance to the Sheraton Hotel is not obscured. But more importantly, it's set absolutely on the axis of the Usher Hall. So it talks to the Usher Hall across, what should we say, 100 years, one public building to another. Entering it, you can see there's a cafe here at ground level. There's a box office on the other side of this space, and you can look up and look down. So you can see a mezzanine above, and we'll go there now. So that is a special cafe upstairs. It can be used for exhibitions as well, and private receptions possibly. And there you can see that it also connects through to the square. Of course, one of the reasons we're putting it in the Sheraton, in the Festival Square, is that, as Ken mentioned, it's not been a great success. And we're hoping that this building, which is open from 9 o'clock in the morning till 1 o'clock in the morning, unlike, say, for example, the Usher Hall on the other side of the road, will intrinsically populate the square and animate it in a way that it hasn't been done already. Now we're going downstairs. You can go straight downstairs into a much bigger space where there is the bar and the cafe for the Filmhouse. And around you, you can see various names, which are just speculative at the moment, of the 6 auditoria. And between the bar and the cafe is a slot of space, which is lit from above. And you can see there, you can see the Usher Hall through that pavement window. But if you look down, you can see people coming and going to the 6 auditoria. So the process of going to the cinema is very much related to the outside. It's not as if you disappear down into some strange subterranean space. This is the cinema concourse, where you would, if you have to queue up to go into a cinema, you would wait. And this is one of the 2 main education suites, which itself can be subdivided. And then also this whole space can be used for conferences as well. So it's a very flexible space indeed. And now we're going to go into, I think, the largest of the 6 auditoria. They're all different sizes and different designs. I'd like to think when we get round to the interior design, there will all be different characters as well. So we're moving sideways now into the largest of the cinemas, and you can see how that sits underneath the square. We're occupying, incidentally, the entire footprint of the square. So that's one of the cinema screens, which say the interior design is still to come. And now we've just popped outside, and you can see there's a route to the Sheraton Hotel, and you can see right through the building. So it's very transparent. Our whole idea about this building is to make, if you like, an object building in a square. It's not to divide the square into 2, so that's, you know, those of you might know Oxford and the Radcliffe camera and what have you. We're also resetting the Sheraton Hotel and giving it a terrace and a much better entrance than the one it has at the moment. So we're trying to be good neighbours to the Sheraton. Now we're going upstairs and we're going into the festival centre itself. And you'll see the rather unusual, almost unique feature of this space is that we have a big window, and from that you can see the Usher Hall and the castle. And then when the film is ready, if you're showing a film, that disappears behind a screen. So you have this interesting conversation between wherever you've been on the film and coming back to the world of Edinburgh again, which I think will be quite a spectacular feature. This is the secondary space on the festival centre, which can be used for its own meetings, but otherwise is a sort of foyer to the festival cinema itself. And that cinema can have retractable seats, as you can see here. So it can be used for a flat floor event or a dinner or reception or whatever have you, which again will be spectacular as a result of the window to the city. So I think that will be a must-go to space in itself. And then we're going to go up. We've got two identical floors of offices, so we'll just go to one of them. And I mean, these are obviously private, but we've got a rather nice boardroom, you'll see that, and cellular offices around the side and general office space in the middle. And that's whoever gets to work there gets a rather nice view. And we're going to flip past the next floor of offices and go straight into the restaurant. Now, there are already some rooftop restaurants in Edinburgh. This is probably the most spectacular because it has a 180-degree panorama of all the history of Edinburgh, the new town in one direction, the castle in the other direction, and the old town and the Victorian city in the third direction. It also has external terrace seating, as you can see. And then when you get to the prow of this restaurant, you find a spiral staircase, which takes you up to a rooftop bar, which we would like to think would operate for maybe 6 months of the year. It has a retractable roof, as you'll see in a second. And we're going up the spiral staircase, and you might even go in the other direction, go there for a drink before dinner and then go down the spiral staircase. And there you are in the rooftop bar. And in bar mode, we seem to have hit a cinema glitch. And then in cinema mode, so there's a screen and you can sit there on a summer's evening. Instead of going to the tattoo, you can watch a film and look at it over the lights of Edinburgh as well, which we think also would be an incredibly attractive feature. So we're really trying to push the boat out with this building, not simply amplify and extend what Filmhouse are doing already, but to make a building which people will love in Edinburgh and which will be a must-go-to building for all the many visitors that the city attracts. So here is the last few helicopter shots of the building. Seem to have got a bit of a jerky moment in the movie here. I'm not quite finished yet. And there it finishes right on axis with the Usher Hall. So you can see the whole square as well is completely re-landscaped. And as Ken said a minute ago, will also be under the organisation of the Filmhouse to arrange external events going on in the square during the course of the year. That's me. That's great, Richard. Thank you very much. I think it's been touched on quite a bit there. It's positioning in Festival Square and opposite the Usher Hall, and obviously surrounded by the Lyceum and the Traverse Theatre. So I just wanted to bring up another poll. And this one's to ask you if you currently think of that Lothian Road area as Edinburgh's cultural quarter. So it's just a straightforward, quick yes or no answer. Paul? Okay, I think that's pretty well all of the votes in. A couple of people popped off for a cup of tea, perhaps. So we've got 64% do think already that it is Edinburgh's cultural quarter, and a 36% are still to feel that, to be convinced by that. Okay. So next we're going to hand over to Fraser Littlejohn, who's going to take you through some of the logistic aspects of this proposal and consultation.
Thank you, Susie, and thank you to those attending the presentation today. Montague Evans provide town planning and property advice to CMI Filmhouse and have been working as part of a broader team of consultants as we work to develop the proposals with a view to submitting a planning application to the City of Edinburgh Council towards the end of summer 2020. I will explain a little more of the planning context and planning process associated with the proposed development. There have been ongoing discussions with the City of Edinburgh Council and other key stakeholders in relation to the Filmhouse and its future over a number of years. In recent months, there has been significant engagement in relation to the existing site of the Filmhouse and its opportunities and constraints, and also the potential for a new home for the Filmhouse at Festival Square. The council required to determine any forthcoming planning application in accordance with the development plan, unless material considerations indicate otherwise. The development plan for the site includes the Edinburgh Local Development Plan, an extract of which is shown. Briefly stated, in terms of the development plan, the site is located within the defined city centre. The site is located within the West End Conservation Area and adjacent to the World Heritage Site. Festival Square itself forms an identified area of open space. The policies of the development plan are numerous. Briefly stated, the development plan does seek to support a variety of uses in the city centre, including entertainment and leisure developments. Policy supports comprehensively designed proposals which maximise the potential of the site, a use or a mix of uses appropriate to its location, its accessibility characteristics, and the character of the surrounding area. They seek to create activity. Policies of the plan seek to have new development have regard to its setting. From a planning perspective, some of the key points we've been considering include how the building relates to its surroundings, including in relation to the World Heritage Site, how the building sits in Festival Square and how it can help activate the square, and how we can create a sustainable building. The proposals represent a unique and exciting opportunity for the city. As part of the initial stages of consultation of the proposals, the Festival Square site were presented to Edinburgh's Urban Design Panel on the 29th of January this year. The proposed development is of a size and scale that it is considered to be a major application proposal in the context of the relevant regulations. Accordingly, and in advance of the submission of a formal application, a proposal of application notice was submitted to the Council on the 11th of March 2020. The submission included a consultation strategy detailing the nature of the consultation steps to be undertaken before the application is formally submitted as part of this pre-application consultation process. At this stage, comments are to Filmhouse as prospective applicants. Comments are made to the project team at this stage and will inform the forthcoming application submission and development of design. A report of pre-application consultation will accompany the planning application and will detail the nature of the comments received during this period. The report will detail the project team's responses to the various issues raised. There will be an opportunity to make comments direct to the City of Edinburgh Council as planning authority once an application is made. Details of the consultation strategy were widely circulated and have appeared across social media platforms and in the press, both locally and nationally. As we've heard, and in light of lockdown, Scottish Government advice has been to move to an online engagement, which has culminated in various sessions, including today's online forum. Pre-application discussions with the City of Edinburgh Council and relevant stakeholders continue. Given the nature of the site and the surrounds, being within the conservation area and adjacent to the World Heritage, any application will be supported by a suite of environmental information, including an environmental impact assessment. In addition to the environmental impact assessment report, relevant assessments are being prepared and will be submitted with the planning application, including in relation to heritage and sustainability. Just to summarise on timescales, in going forward, the public consultation is live until the 12th of July 2020. The intention is to bring forward an application for detailed planning permission by the end of summer. The application is a major development which means there is a minimum of statutory 4-month determination period within which the Council will determine proposals. The application will likely be presented to a future meeting of the Council's Development Management Subcommittee. Thereafter, and hopefully with a positive recommendation, we would look to begin the fundraising process. It is envisaged that completion of the project is likely to take up to 5 years. Just to conclude, all comments received at this time are to the Filmhouse project team and are not representations to the City of Edinburgh Council. An opportunity to make representations to the Council will exist when a formal planning application is made. We look forward to discussing the proposals with you and continuing to engage with stakeholders such as yourselves in going forward.
That's great. Thank you, Fraser. So that's everyone presented and said something, and we've already got a couple of questions through on the Q&A function, so that's brilliant. Thank you. Please remember it's there and add anything to it. We also received quite a few in advance, and I just want to kick off with one of those. So 2 people, Penelope Ciancanelli and Reginald Buse, both got in touch to ask a bit more about why not renovate and restore the current Filmhouse building Reginald particularly feels that it works very well. He's very fond of Cinema One and wouldn't like to see that experience spoiled. So just perhaps, Ken, you touched on it a little when you did your presentation. Perhaps you could come back to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, first of all, thank you very much for asking the questions. As I said at the beginning, I fully appreciate how much affection Filmhouse is held with by so many people. I suppose the thing I want to sort of differentiate is between Filmhouse as a building and Filmhouse as an organisation. And that what we are trying to achieve with this is that it's very much based on the existing ethos and values of Filmhouse as an organisation, is what we're trying to propose for the new building. So absolutely the independence of spirit and of programming, but crucially of identity, that what we don't want is an anonymous multiplex experience. What we do want is individual cinemas, and Richard referenced it in terms of the interior design, how we ensure that each of the cinemas have their own identity and it feels like you're going into a special space and place. But crucially, that it's a comfortable special place and space. And that it's an accessible special place and space, because currently it isn't for so many people who want to come to Filmhouse. So for example, if you're a wheelchair user trying to get into Cinema 2, you have to go through the narrow corridor, you go down into the rear corridor on a platform lift that's a bit sugary, but as big as we can get it. And then you go into the final platform lift into the single wheelchair space in Cinema 2. So if you're lucky enough to be that person, then great, although it's a bit of a trawl to get there, but that's it. That's the one wheelchair space that we have available in Cinema 2. And what we want to ensure, for example, in the new building, is that the whole building is accessible, as I said, but also it's not just one or two wheelchair spaces, that we have enough spaces for everyone with whatever mobility issues that we can manage into the building, and they can get there very easily, as opposed to it being a major exercise. So we don't want to lose any of that. We don't want to lose the ethos and the values of the existing organisation, but what we do want is the ability to deliver that in a really special and comfortable and accessible space.
That's great, thank you. Does anybody have anything else they want to add to that, Richard or Fraser? No? Returning to Reginald for a moment again, he's interested to know, with the increase in cinema capacity, I suppose how that will be programmed. So he wants to understand there's no larger cinema space in one room. So how do you propose to deal with films that might attract a larger audience? Would you program them in two spaces? Just perhaps you can talk a little bit about how you see that working with more cinema screens.
Well, the program policy will remain the same, which is we want to show the broadest range of films from the broadest range of filmmakers from the broadest range of countries to the broadest range of audiences. And when I said at the beginning that we're bursting at the seams, it's physically bursting at the seams, but also programming-wise bursting at the seams. So we currently show on average more than 400 different feature films each year in a range of programs within Filmhouse. A lot of those are our films, so it's the films that Filmhouse itself programs. But what we also do, as I said, is that we host an awful lot of other smaller film festivals, as well as Edinburgh International Film Festival each year as well. And what we want to do is create more space for more of those films and more smaller film festivals to be able to show films within Filmhouse. As an example, the peak time for the small film festivals each year is in the autumn period, so that's sort of mid-September through to Christmas time. That coincides with the peak period of when we've got the main art house film releases in normal years, and that's because they're being released in time for the award seasons, the BAFTAs, the Golden Globes, and the Oscars. And we have this huge pressure on going, the regular Filmhouse audience wants to see those current releases when they come out, but then we have this raft of other smaller festivals desperately trying to squeeze in what they're wanting to show. They also want to do other activities. So as well as showing films, they're wanting to run education events, learning events, potentially some kind of conference activity as well. And we have no facilities for that within the existing building. So what we're trying to do is create space that allows us to do more of what we do, and crucially allows more people and within Edinburgh and partners in Edinburgh to show more of what they're wanting to do and do more of what they want to do. Answering the specific question of if we've got very popular films, it's great. We don't have an intention of putting on more than one screen. So for thinking of, I lived through in Glasgow, and when the Harry Potter films were released, increasing number of screens in the local Cineworld were taken up. And so by the end, all 18 screens for the opening weekend of Deathly Hallows Part 2 in the big Cineworld in the centre of Glasgow were taken up with one film. That doesn't satisfy our programming policy, strategy, ambition, ethos, values, anything. What we are wanting to do is how do we give people choice? And that remains absolutely core to what we're trying to achieve.
Great. I'm going to come to we've got quite a few questions now, so some of the live questions. And there are two that came in at the beginning that perhaps we can answer together. And Richard, this may be for you. Has consideration been given to designing a building that is in the style of other buildings in the vicinity? And then the other question that relates perhaps is, what height is the building in relation to other buildings in the square?
Okay, well, those are two pretty straightforward questions. In terms of style, well, I'm a great believer that we should build buildings of our own time and not make any sort of fake architecture. So we're not trying to pretend to be something else. And the second question, and the corollary to that is, what are the adjacent buildings? Well, curiously enough, one of the attractions of Festival Square is that we have three, if I can be a little bit critical here, shall we say, rather mundane buildings from the 1970s and 80s. So we don't have the usual problems of coexisting with historic buildings. Of course, we have the Usher Hall across the road, and as I tried to say in my little piece at the beginning, there is a conversation, deliberate conversation across the road and across 100 years between the Usher Hall and the new building, as you would expect. So I think, you know, the style is what it is. It's and we're free here in a way that perhaps elsewhere in Edinburgh we might not be so free. In terms of height, well, height is a very emotional question in Edinburgh, and on the whole, we've done a pretty good job at controlling the heights of buildings compared to, say, Glasgow, for example. I'm a great believer that the best cities all over the world are the ones where you distinguish between the general buildings and the special buildings. General buildings are pretty obvious. They're where people live and work and shop and all that kind of stuff. But the special buildings, historically, those were predominantly churches, but as time has gone on, they've included town halls. In Edinburgh's case, of course, we have the two great railway hotels. We have on the Mound, the Bank of Scotland headquarters. So there are other sort of special event buildings that do, and quite properly, pierce the skyline. And so we think, you know, a cultural building, a national cultural building, an important cultural building, should be allowed to rise higher than others. In fact, we think it's rather a good idea, actually, that it does draw attention to itself. So we don't have a problem in terms of the function of the building. In terms of the critical views of the castle from near and far, we've checked all that out, and we're not obscuring anybody's view from anywhere, so that's all right. And in terms of the proportions of the spaces round about, because it's a fairly short building, an object building, again, that doesn't really come up as an issue. So on this occasion, it's one of those special cases where I think we can build high, and we want to use that to our advantage, as you've seen in the movie, that it actually will be a place that people want to go to look out from at their city. And there isn't anywhere at that end of Edinburgh at the moment to do that.
Ken, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I think Richard's actually said it all. I think, you know, as someone who grew up in Edinburgh and watched the development of Festival Square, it hasn't worked as a space. The BBC screen was there for 10, 11, 12 years. And I think there were 4 occasions over that 12-year period where it was actually busy. When Andy Murray was winning Olympic gold, and then Wimbledon the following year, Chris Hoy winning gold, and then I think one of the royal weddings. But beyond that, Festival Square hasn't been a space that has been used particularly well. And I suppose that the context, therefore, is how do we use this public space as effectively and inspirationally as we can? But absolutely, it needs to be set in context. And our context is that there's a framing of 3 other buildings. I won't describe them as Richard's described them, but that you've got their relationship with the other cultural buildings nearby. And if you think of Lothian Road and that area's cultural quarter, yes, you've got potentially 4 major cultural consumption buildings, but you've also got the Art College as well as the Odeon and the Cameo and the King's Theatre and the Conference Centre. So you've got a range of other buildings that are very much about the production and distribution of art and culture, as well as the main buildings that we've just been talking about.
And just to add, Susie, that one of the things that the planning application will cover is an assessment of key views, both historical views and local views, so showing the building in its context. The initial work that Richard and the team at Richard Murphy Architects have undertaken would suggest that the building sits quite well in its context, but obviously the planning application will look at that matter in quite a bit of detail.
Great. We've got a question in. I'm going to jump to Rui's question at the moment because it sort of ties in a little bit to at least the roof terrace aspect. So Rui's question is, my concern is that the terrace, outdoor space and upper floors will be hijacked by tourists, similar to the Elbe Philharmonie in Hamburg, which will muscle out residents. So how do you plan to make this properly accessible to ordinary Edinburgh residents as opposed to making it a tourist attraction? Perhaps, Ken, you want to kick off on that?
I think it's such a good question, and with context of discussions and debate in the city over the last couple of years, or I could happily say over the last 55 years of my memory of debates around how Edinburgh and its relationship with tourism and the relationship with the festivals and so on. What we're looking at is that first and foremost, this building is for the people of Edinburgh, and that's whether you're wanting to make films, learn about films, or come and watch films. The vast majority of people coming to Filmhouse each year are from the city of Edinburgh, and actually the vast majority, 70% of people coming to the International Film Festival each year are from the city of Edinburgh. So it's existing organisations already do that. In terms of the space both within the building and what we're attracting, what we said earlier, or alluded to earlier, is that we'll be working with our partner organisations in how we can curate those spaces, the public spaces on the square. And there's some examples out there of how other spaces, not just in Edinburgh, but in particularly look at places in Montreal, where you have, in effect, a management group going, how do we ensure these spaces, yes, are attractive for any visitor to come to, but that there are activities going on. And so, for example, we've been speaking with the Art Festival and other arts organisations about how we can curate art, presenting art, making it easy for that to happen on that space. And in terms of not just visual art, but potentially performance as well. And so it becomes a space that isn't just about a lot of people cramming in, it becomes a space that there are different things going on and different reasons for different people to be there. In terms of the terrace itself, to the immediate rear of the building, it's a good question. We've started conversations with the Sheraton about how we can make sure that things work for them and work for us and everyone else. And then if I take you inside the building, we're fully aware that it's a public building. It has to be for the public. And there are elements of the building that will inevitably be slightly blocked, as in order to get into the cinema screens, you'll need to buy a ticket. In order to go to the restaurant, you'll need to spend some money on food or drink. But what we want to do is try and create space within the building that people can go to, and that members of the public can go to, whoever they are and wherever they're from. And so it becomes something that isn't just for outsiders, first and foremost, it's for the people of Edinburgh.
Would you like my take on that as well? I mean, I think it's a very interesting point. I interpreted the word terrace as the roof terrace rather than the terrace outside the Sheraton Hotel. And our questioner, whose name I've forgotten, I'm sorry, did sort of make the point, which is quite nice, saying that this is going to be popular. This is going to be a place you want to go to. So I would say that's a tick, regardless of whether you're a tourist or a local. And it's good that people are wanting to come to the building for whatever reason, if I might say so. Because I think in a strange sort of way, if you look at the way arts buildings generally have evolved in the last 50 years, they've become a lot more popular as social places to visit, as well as for the function of the arts, the art in it, whether it's a gallery or a museum or indeed a theatre or whatever. And I think this is good, because I think it's inclusive. I think people, if you get people across the threshold of a building, well, for whatever reason they go there for, you then have got a really good chance of interesting them in what the real business of the building is all about. So let's say, for example, whether you're a local or a tourist and you decide you want to, it's a lovely sunny day, let's go for a drink after work to the roof terrace. And while you're there, you'll see something about a film. There'll be something playing or some advert about a film. And you'll think, oh, yes, I haven't been to the cinema for a year or two. You get out of the habit of these things. And suddenly people get interested in the idea of going to the cinema again. I know that happens at Dundee, at DCA, the building we did there, where the restaurant is immediately adjacent to the cinemas. And people go there for a meal, and then they start looking and saying, oh, gosh, yes, that's a film. That's interesting. I should be going to that. And so it's about sort of seducing and tempting people to actually go to the business of the building through all the other stuff. So I think it's good that it's a popular building. I mean, the tourist versus local thing, that's a much bigger conversation. And obviously, tourism is both good and bad. It has to be kept in check, but it also is essential for Edinburgh's economy. So it's a balancing act, really.
That's great, thank you. We've got just a little over 10 minutes left, so I'm going to move us on through one, possibly two, if we're quick, questions. Kev Rowe has got in touch and asked, I'd love to know more about the environmental impact and plans to make it as carbon neutral as possible. Looks like a fantastic proposal though, so thank you for that. Who would like to talk about the environmental impact and plans?
I think that probably goes to me, although I don't have my technical team to back me up. I mean, the interesting thing to start with is that there's the majority of the volume of this building is actually underground. So in terms of heat loss and all those kind of things that you have to deal with in northern latitudes, we are off to a flying start, if you can have an underground off to a flying start. So that's very good news in many ways. So we're left with the building above ground, and obviously we want to, as Ken said in his piece, we want to make sure that all the energy sources are sourced environmentally. We want to make it a highly insulated building. Obviously we have to deal with the spaces themselves have to be very climatically controlled, so we have to have all those things like air conditioning and what have you, but we also want to generate as much electricity as we can in the building, and we have no fossil fuels in the building whatsoever. So we have a lot of photovoltaic cells and air-to-air source heating as well. So all that has been sort of calculated out by Arups, and we're going to do the best we can to make this building as sustainable as we can.
If I can come in there, I mean, I think just going back to my presentation, it's one of the 4 design principles that we had, was how do we make it as environmentally sustainable as it can be. Rich has talked about the building itself. What we had sort of 3 things we've looked at. One is the operational aspects, so how do we minimize that? And there's the physical stuff within the building, but then just operationally, how do we do that? And we've made huge strides over the last few years in terms of the existing building and our sister building in Aberdeen on that. But secondly, it's also just about how we ensure that people coming to the building do so in an environmentally friendly way as possible. And so that includes staff. So there will be secure cycling spaces for staff, as well as shower facilities. So we'll be actively encouraging staff to do the environmentally friendly approach to the building. It's obviously also not got, or maybe it isn't obvious, but we don't have any car parking spaces. It's very much about, one of the beauties of being in the city centre, and particularly on Lothian Road, is that it's very accessible from across the whole city. And one of the reasons that Filmhouse has worked to this date is it has a bus stop immediately outside that deposits and picks up people on a regular basis coming to see us. And so what we're looking at is how we maintain that, but also address some of the issues that we haven't been able to deal with. So there aren't enough, for example, cycling spaces outside the existing Filmhouse. We're going to have a lot of cycling spaces for folk, cycle racks for people to lock their bikes to on the square, that then makes it again a more attractive space to come and visit. And the final bit is that we've been working with spokes, as well as the urban design consultants, in how we ensure that we tie into the emerging networks of cycle routes within the city to make sure that we become part of that natural flow of people coming to and from that part of the city centre.
Smashing. Okay. Those are all the live questions. I'm just going to return to a couple of the advanced questions because we've got a moment before we finish up. So one of Penelope's other questions was just around what proportion of the building work would go to local companies. And I wonder if, Ken, perhaps you can answer that.
We're working with locally based companies at the moment in terms of the design work and all the necessary consultants and so on who are required at this moment in time. When it gets to the actual build element, we have to go out to tender. Up until recently, it was to the whole of the European Union. Our understanding is it will still have to be to the whole of the UK as a bare minimum in terms of who we go out to tender with. And that will therefore determine who we, in the end, pick to build the actual project. But I think what we can say is when it gets to the operational aspect of the building once it is built, is we will continue our path of what we currently do. So for example, in the cafe bar, we absolutely use as local suppliers as we can manage for the food and for the drink, and that we work very closely with a range of other locally based suppliers for all the different aspects of managing quite a complex building. And we would absolutely intend that that will continue for the future. I suppose the final bit is that all the partner organisations we work with, or the vast majority of them, are locally based. And so actually by developing this space in this way, it's creating more opportunities for them to grow their business and activity and projects and charities and so on in the future compared to what they're able to do at the moment.
That's great, thank you. I feel that the questions have led us to cover a lot of ground, and perhaps most aspects that we've certainly been discussing together for months now. Is there anything that any of you feel we've glossed over or that you'd like to return to or to mention before we finish up?
I think from my side, I'll let Richard come in a sec, but I think I'm aware this is really different. I've had the privilege, but also the opportunity to follow the story of the development of this design over the last couple of years since Richard and I started discussing this. And we've been very lucky to get private support that's allowed us to get it to this point. But I'm also aware it's very different and it's quite challenging as well, particularly if that sort of big reveal side and folk go, oh, where did that come from? And I suppose just emphasising that what we're not doing is trying to supplant an existing building and supplant an existing organisation, but it's really emphasising what we're actually trying to do is create a genuine community of film. And that's for the people who are making the films, the people who are curating the films and film festivals, folk who are involved in film education, as well as audiences of all different kinds. And so as Richard was saying earlier, that almost wherever you go in the building, whoever you bump into will have some kind of connection to film. And that you can sit down with them in the cafe bar or on the terrace or wherever, and you can have a chat because you've got a common point of reference. And where we really struggle with the existing building is to do that. It happens on occasions during some of the film festivals, both smaller and larger, but on the whole, we can't fit all of those different elements in at the same time. And the best example I've got of where that has worked brilliantly is actually in Broadway cinema in Nottingham. So I was based in Nottingham for 6 years, and Broadway was the hub. It had the Screen Commission, production companies, film education organisations, smaller film festivals. It worked closely with the two universities, and it had, when I was there, 2 screens, and I was running the training and production unit in the basement, Intermedia. And so you had the folk who were learning about how to make films and learning about film as a craft. And you knew that the cafe bar was the space that everyone would come to, and whoever you plonked yourself down next to, you felt you were part of this community. And what we're trying to do here is create that sense of community of film for the citizens of Edinburgh.
That's great. Oh, sorry, Richard, would you like to?
I was just going to say, I think what's exciting to me about the building is that we're carrying on a great Edinburgh tradition. if you look at the history of Edinburgh, particularly the 18th and 19th century, is that Edinburgh has been extraordinarily ambitious for the size of city that it is. I mean, the most obvious starting point is the idea of the new town, which was a revolutionary concept in how to live, to move from the old town to the new town. And then going on through the 19th century, all the amazing public schools you can find around the sort of inner suburbs, the architectural effort that was created on making those incredible monuments, which we still enjoy today. And then all the cultural buildings that have come along. There was no expense spared. There was huge ambition to do the very best for the city. And that's what we want to do here. We want to create a building which Edinburgh people can be enormously proud, because, you know, Glasgow hasn't got one, London hasn't got one. It puts us on the same platform as, say, the Eye in Amsterdam or what have you. And people will come here to see the building and to see all the activity that's going on in the building. And that will be something that Edinburgh people, I think, will be very, very proud of. So I'm very excited that the Filmhouse have got that kind of ambition in creating this building.
Super. We've actually just had a question come in while you've been summing up and adding some of your final thoughts. And I'm aware that we're very nearly at 2 o'clock. But one of our attendees has asked, what impact, if any, will the COVID-19 pandemic have on the proposed building? People could be watching more film at home. I feel that's a Ken question.
It does feel like a Ken question. The digital revolution has been going on in film for 20 years. So the fact that folk watch film, in terms of before then, the demise of cinemas in the mid-1980s was forecast very strongly then. What people want, however, is that communal experience. Maybe not this week or this month with the impact of COVID-19 and coronavirus, but what folk want in so much of life. We are social beings, and that utter delight of going to a big dark space with a bunch of strangers to watch a film being presented beautifully is what we do for a living, and it's why everyone really enjoys coming to what we do already and what we would want to be doing more of. The impact is short term, but short term may be a year, 18 months, I think, in terms of individual cinemas and how Filmhouse itself is looking at how it can reopen safely for customers and for staff, and safely in terms of affordability in the coming weeks and months. But in the medium and long term, that desire, utterly base human desire to congregate, I think will remain. And even, yes, you can watch films, almost as many films as you want at home, but the opportunity to go out, I think will remain absolutely core. And the one example, sort of another industry, but is going out to a restaurant. You can cook your own food, you can buy your own drink, but there is nothing better from that side than actually going out and having a meal with friends in a beautiful communal space. And I think cinema sits with that, theatre sits within that, concert halls sit within that, and so many other aspects of what makes us human.
Very empowering speech. Fraser, do you have anything to add just before I wrap up with a little more housekeeping?
Yeah, thanks, Susie. It was really just to thank those attending today for submitting their questions, and just to reiterate that the pre-application consultation period is live up until the 12th of July 2020. So just to encourage people to continue to feedback any comments that they have on the proposed development to the project team.
That's perfect. That was my wrap up. So thank you for that. Yes, just thank you to everyone that's joined us today. It's been really great to have a chance to speak to you and to listen and to answer questions directly. There is information on the website. As Fraser said, it is still live, the consultation, until the 12th of July. So please do take the opportunity still to share your thoughts and to let others know that this is going on. We have a session this evening at 7 and 2 more tomorrow at 10 and at 4. So if you think somebody might like to join us, please do have them get in touch. I think that's everything from us. So thank you very much. And thank you to Louisa for your slick captioning. We'll see you all soon.